with taps played by First Sergeant Ralph Harris. Thank you, First Sergeant Harris, and thank you, Patricia O'Connor. My name is Roger Martin. I'll be your MC for the afternoon. First thing is to remind you, if you have forgotten to silence your cell phones, please do so now. The bathrooms are through this door. You'll see the men and women's bathrooms are adjacent. Just be careful of the wires across the floor as you go through that. Okay. I'm going to begin with a poem that's on the broadside. If you haven't picked up the broadside, they're on this table to the front. It's called "The Poet Donates His Body to a Medical School." An anatomic gift, a bit of thrift, Horatio, my wedded heart, disjoined, to grace an antiseptic table, to give an earnest acolyte a hands-on try to learn, sans my undeserved complaints, hidden signs of brief humanity's interior design. There'll be no ghost to haunt the stage, no sentient threat or plea for sympathy. And when my bones teach nothing new, in memory, my too disembodied self will now and then appear in unintended stealth. Perchance, in some poor poet's metered dream, he'll view what's left and say, "Alas, poor man, I knew his brief tirades when he began to strut his verse upon the stage. Oh God, how weary, stale, and flat, and most of all, unprofitable is two heavy lines upon the page. And my next poem, I think I have left. The second poem is titled Grief. It comes from the Black River Death Poems anthology that I was honored to be sharing space with Curt. Grief. Perhaps you have entered that infinite space where only the ache seems real and the rest like the hum of a distant machine. Voices follow on padded feet and your smiles are muffled replies to sympathetic eyes. Gone, but felt nearby, like a shadow light of nerves in an amputated leg, and you say, where? But that returns you to your space, where only the ache remains, the hollow center of grief. Even so, voices reach you there, and you answer lovingly. Something in you knows that morning comes after the rites and heavy days are done, and the long bonds of love do not break when twisted hard as this. And now I'd like to bring forward Dee O'Connor, the creator of this event, Curt's lifelong support system, creator of the endowment, Curtin Endowment, to fund youth poetry in the Worcester County going forward. So we thank you for that. There are books on the back table. All purchases will go in a box there, and that will be contributed to the endowment. You can also donate through the Greater Worcester Community Foundation or through the Worcester County Poetry Foundation. I want to thank them for co-sponsoring this event as well. So please welcome Dee O'Connor.
Wow, thank you all for coming. This is such an amazing mixture of people from Curt's past and present, and family from both sides, and people from the Worcester County Poetry Association, and people from CASA who he did a lot of volunteer work with, and friends who supported me through the last few years. It's just amazing to have everybody all together in one room. Most of you know that Curt was my best friend and the love of my life. In fact, in our not so humble moments, we thought this was one of the great loves of the 20th, 21st centuries. It was very important to us. And it's fitting for us that we're having this ceremony at the Unitarian Universalist Church because we were married in a Unitarian Universalist Church 44 years ago in January. And so I want to thank the folks here for allowing us this wonderful space, and to note that I fell in love with poetry before I fell in love with Curt. I fell in love with poetry in high school, actually, and it was due to the great efforts of the Worcester County Poetry Association. Back in 1971, when they were first beginning, I was a junior in high school, and I actually came to a reading of Robert Francis, who's one of my favorite poets, second to Curt. So I want to thank the Poetry Association also for their hosting of this event and co-sponsorship. Curt, as you know, was a poet. He was a teacher. He was a veteran and very proud of serving in 2 branches of the military. He was a nature lover. He was a very strong advocate for children, for elders, for people with mental health needs, and CASA work was an example of his work with children on behalf of children, as well as with the Department of Children and Families. So I'm delighted that a couple people from CASA were able to come. He would also want to say he was a dock worker and a bus driver and an insurance clerk and a private investigator, and his list goes on about 20 more, so I'm not going to read any more of those. I want to he was a quirky humorist. He was a Mark Twain impressionist, and that's why, even though it wasn't a very good picture, I put that on the cover. That's Curt being Mark Twain. He did it a few occasions, and he actually did a whole routine around Mark Twain. He was one of his favorite authors, and we donated most of his Twain collection to the Twain Center out in Elmira, New York. He was such a quirky humorist that most of the students never got his jokes. Maybe why we connected to one another in a different way. He had tremendous integrity and ethics and humanistic values. Anyone who knew him knew that. But he was not a religious man. So I thought it was best to honor him through his poetry. And so you're going to get some snippets from each of the books that we worked on together over the past half dozen years. I will say that though it's not a religious service, it may be about as long as a religious service, so I hope you're okay with that. I found some amazing surprises as I started going through Curt's work, and I knew his poetry in depth because I helped him get them published, but I didn't have a realization of just how much else he had written. I found a whole bunch of plays that he had written. One in particular, I found that he had written during the first year that we were married. He was on sabbatical. I thought he was writing poetry. I discovered an entire full-length play. I found some Irish sketches. I found an aborted sci-fi play, something called a much too long drama about Periphery College. It was about 3.5 pages long. And a story. Like many men who still remember their adolescent days, Curt always loved a good fart joke. And so one of his stories is Farts, a lower class privilege. Happily, he used a pseudonym for that, which was John Blatt. He also had an essay that I haven't quite read yet that I skimmed through about on changing one's mind. And then I found a journal. And this was kind of amazing to me. It wasn't your typical journal, but it was a bunch of short essays that were whatever he was pondering at the moment, but they were really deep and philosophical. And I started to look at it, and I thought, I wasn't sure if I should really read it because it seemed so personal. And then, so I was reading it because it was about two-thirds of the way into the journal. I found this amazing surprise quote. Oh, my love, if you ever read this, I hope you will. Nothing is more true than the effort to say love to you. Love I cannot say well enough. So that was just a wonderful affirmation. Curt was always planning for the end of life. And so the anatomical gift that he gave was that his body is still currently being analyzed by a medical student at UMass Medical, and that's a great program for anybody who's interested. Look into it. As I went through all his papers, I found he'd been writing things back to 1969, well before I knew him. And we shared a knowledge of aging and things like that, so that got us writing like our living wills and that sort of thing. But I found at least 8 or 10 of those kind of notes. Then I found a whole bunch of notes in the journal. It was kind of amazing. And it was all in similar kinds of themes, but he wanted to be sure people knew this. No heroic measures. He wanted to be donated as an anatomical gift. And then he had some specific comments about his funeral, if such were to happen, and I'll say something about that in a minute. But then he also wanted someone to read a poem that he calls Belief. And so you see the context of being in the Unitarian Church. And he actually said both versions, but he only has one version. He has one called Credo that's very similar, but I decided one poem was enough for this occasion. Belief. My religion has no name, neither in Sanskrit nor science, nor all that is written between. It is a weaving, an art needing time. I pursue elusive music, such as that of wind speaking its meaning in trees, or minds informed of other worlds, or no world at all, secret within chaotic everywhere, out of a dense beginning. And I trace the lines where life survived in a seeming aimless vein. Neither do I know their names, the woven sighs of this diaspora, though they weave me into listening. I do believe they are beautiful. And then there was, I picked one of the closing comments from all of his end-of-life things that seemed very fitting. So he said, celebrate my going in some sort of party, a little like the old-time Irish wakes I knew as a boy in Boston. Food, a bit of drink to loosen the spirits, the company of those who loved me with all my faults. Think of how I would have enjoyed it. Hell, think anything you want. Have a party.
Thank you, Dee, and indeed, we'll make today a party. Now we have a whole series of Curt's poems read by different members of the audience, and some memories. As we know, if you knew Curt, he would want things to be concise. So we also have time at meal if it's a lengthy memory, but I would first like to welcome up Peter Golden. Peter, is Peter here? Up there.
It's always good to get a round of applause before you open your mouth. He asked me to say a few words about Curt, and as my wife knows, that's terribly difficult for me. Life with Peter was a lecture series. But I had good luck at the age of 9 to encounter Curt, George Aloysius Curt, as we called him, behind his back. He was charismatic. He was enormously gifted as a leader, as an inspirational resource. There were about 40 of us little rapscallions in Berkshire Boys Camp, and he enveloped all of us in his embrace. He imparted unto me a spirit of adventure, which has informed my whole life, a profound relationship with nature, which I came to love dearly, and best of all, something I didn't recognize in myself for years, but literally provided me with an income of nurture, and that was the ability to express myself. Blessings upon thee, Curt, for all of us who knew him, who loved him, who admired him. I'll read now 2 of Curt's poems and join them together as a matter of efficacy and also because I am a compulsive editor. And I hope you enjoy them as much as I do sharing them with you. Thank you for this opportunity. Whole days can drift away under sunlight by the palm. My mind lies flat as a branch of pine, lightly drifting thought to thought. Easy senses move within the wide, high drift of a circling hawk. Slow music in the grass, a black hand meanders on my hand. I seem to hear water slipping among the lily pads, and I breathe in time with the sun. The image returns again and again, good as the taste of a chocolate truffle. Such a rich elation leaping over years, remembering not so much the boy as the purity of motion. Airy flight over root, laurel rock and rotting wall, along green twisting trails that lead around the sweet smell of the dark lily pad home. All alone, without a cause to go from here to there, only love of air, pageantry in hemlock, rock and blossom. Where in memory, I never touched the brown, needle padded brow. Blessings upon thee, Curt. Amen.
Thank you, Peter. Our next speaker is a fellow poet and musician. Please welcome Mike Milligan. What I can say about Curt is that he had a boundless mind, that there were no limits to what he would think about, ponder, look at, and that he looked far deeper than just the surface. And as far as we share a love of Mark Twain. But the poem I'm going to read isn't funny, it's poignant. And there's another side, his emotional capacity. Abduction at the Gardner. In 1990, thieves broke into the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Mass. They removed 13 paintings, cut them right out of the frames. As of 2019, and in fact, to amend that, as of 2025, the paintings have not been recovered. There's a quote in here from the last Duchess. I'm just going to raise my left hand when it begins and drop it when it ends, rather than all that funny stuff. I miss the fisherman most, the ghost of peace beneath the heave of boat and wave on the wild sea of Galilee. It got to my teenage blood years ago, how they hung on the lines in the grip of fear, where sails whipped in wild air, how each detail rang so true to a boy who loved the sea. Perhaps if they stole just one, I could believe, romantically, that someone loved it so he made a crypt, climate controlled and lit much better than Gardner's wall. And there he sits alone, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I. His selfish satisfaction thus a little redeemed. But they stole more. Rembrandt and Vermeer, and other precious work, thugs who cut them from their frames. They only saw expensive rags a buyer might reclaim for something under market. Ignorance of awe, wed to sordid souls. I saw blank frames and will not look again. El Jaleo still delights, Della Robbia too, hidden in the murky hall, Raphael and all the grilled and dark-beamed sights, the chilled wonder in sweet passage all around the atrium. Someday before my sight is claimed by the thief time sends at last, I hope to stand by Galilee, rescued and returned. In that tumultuous frame, I will again see peace beneath the heaved waves. Thank you, Curt. Our next speaker will be family member Tom O'Connor. Welcome.
always going to be in my memory because, you know, when people come into your family, it's difficult at first. They don't feel comfortable, and it takes a while to get used to them as a member of the family. Over the years, even with blood family members, you tend to just have it 1 or 2 times a year you really meet and have a chance to talk. And so there's a lot of regrets about the things that we didn't say. Basically, my better memories of Curt. I was involved in Boy Scouts as he was. It was a very close thing in his heart. And every time I would go on a trip with the boys that we were dealing with, he would always ask me for a recount of the events, and we discussed the things he did as a boy, including when he was a Sea Scout in Boston. And also, there was a period of time where I spent time helping him research his family tree, and that was a fun thing. We spent some time together on that. And I'm going to read a poem today that Curt wrote to show you his integration to our family. He wrote this during the time my mother was passing. And my mother stayed at home until the very, very end when she went to hospice. But we would, different brothers and sisters would come every day and take care of her. And Curt wrote this poem called The Family. I believe it is published in that book on anthology about poems about death. Now I'll read that poem. All through the ice of winter, she lay, wrapped within her family's embrace, fragile and light as a mycene figurine. Her bright chemise, a slash of springtime color and pale sheets, amid pale sheets. Dark eyes alive when one of her own came in. Mother of 7, grandmother of 13. She didn't want to leave a one of these, not now, not even from this breathless bed, where every day and every night she struggled for a little air, waiting for one of her own to appear at the bedroom door. Years before, the 3rd of 7 died, and everyone knew he never left her grieving eyes. And every other child, in their own light, she held them in her eyes as if her sight, stronger than all the mistakes that they could make, would bring them safely home. And there they came, loving sons and daughters, in attendance every day. Whatever she wants is what we'll do. And around the clock and turn by turn, she never was alone at home. And the strength was in their eyes this time, and she relied on their determined care. Nobody's arms are stronger than time. Hands that stroked her hair and lips that kissed her in the night. They always knew their energy could not diminish time. Each touch was only to delay the leaving, and every kiss a Godspeed with the lips and grieving. Curt.
Thank you, Tom. Our next speaker is a poet and scholar, Judy Ferrara, and she'll share a couple poems about Curt's humor. Please welcome.
Thanks, Roger. Curt left us such a legacy, and will continue with this wonderful gift that you have given to the Poetry Association We have all been touched by his brilliance and his kindness, and this is a wonderful way to honor Curtin. Two of my favorite poems are in the voice of a character that Curt made up. Katie is only a fictional character. Her voice is drawn from many others, real and imagined. So I'm going to attempt to read it with a rather Irish accent. So if you really know Irish accents, please forgive me ahead of time. But I think one of my favorite poems, so many. Katie and the Italians, for pretty obvious reasons. Katie and the Italians. I've nothing against them, mind you, though it was grand when the neighborhood was only Irish, and you could tell who it was who was stealing towels off the line. Italians started moving in when they ran out of space in another place to put up shrines. Cement to St. Anthony or Rocco. They have an awful passion for cement, using it for steps and porches and even seats. My John says if many more move in, all the houses will sink 10 feet with the weight. That's what happened in Venice, he said. And then there's the smell of their cooking. Sure, it can't be right, spoiling good food with garlic and basil. Myself, I use a spoon or two of salt. And there's only a nice bit of smell to boiled potatoes and butter. Though it does get strong when I boil the beef with cabbage and turnips. At least they've never complained. Though how would I know with them talking in their way faster than I can say the rosary? My John says they put olive oil on their tongues to make them go fast. I do say, they're very generous people. The ones next door gave my John a whole gallon of homemade red wine. We're not sure what to do with it, but we thanked them anyway and gave them a mackerel John caught down at the docks. That's one of my most favorite ones. And then, Katie and the poet. Talk about really taking a step back and looking at yourself in poetry. Curt was a master. Katie and the poet. Isn't he grand? A man has such a way with words, how they flow like God's own thoughts from somewhere you wouldn't be likely to know. And he does it all with bits of talk, scattered around like a broken mirror, instead of a sentence you could read all at once. It's deep, he is, and learned in the things you wouldn't understand any more than a quote in church. But wasn't that a grand poem he wrote, full of words that I haven't heard more than twice in my life? And he read it all with such wonderful feeling, you'd swear to God he was a priest. My John was making eyes all the while, but I can tell you I was deeply moved. The whole thing just flowed like water over a bog. A river of words, and not one of them too plain. I wasn't all that sure of his meaning, but I get the drift. As they would say of fog in the morning. We shouldn't be too proud, you see, pretending to know all the deep things a man like that could say. Still, I wonder, does he talk that way all of the time? It must be a fine headache for his wife to be always thinking, what does he mean? And does he expect an answer?
Thank you, Katie. Yes, but if there's anybody who can follow that act, Paul slows back. So please welcome Paul Slowback.
I believe I had the pleasure of first meeting Dee and Curt about 24 years ago when they came to a poetry reading that I was running at the Federated Church in Sturbridge in their church parlor, which we call the Poets Parlor. And about a week later, Curt sent me this incredible poem. And he captured the feel, the atmosphere of our reading so perfectly. And so what I did is I immediately put it up on our website, and it became our official Poet Parlor poem. And so this, I don't know if this varies from the versions that appeared for art's sake. It might a little bit, but this is the original version that Curt sent me. Poets Parlor, Sturbridge. It's more like a nest or a place on the needle soft forest floor where 3 people nestle in to listen and read. In this small space, warm faces wait within reach, as if the touch of each word feeling held not only hearts in sympathy, but took them by the hands as well. Curtin, March 30th, 2001, so almost exactly, we wrote this exactly 24 years ago. Okay, now I'm going to be really embarrassed because after following Judy, that is incredible. I'm going to do a Katie poem too, but I cannot do an Irish accent. I start out as one, but it might turn into German or Polish. No, please forgive me for mastering this poem, but this is Katie Tells the Pisser. Are you digging my grave again? Last time you diggers got the wrong plot. I had a stranger on my chest till names got put to right. Your shovels wrapped my box like drum corps on parade. I couldn't think for a week after that. I swear you digger men are brain dead. It's just that part of you were buried, and then what's left of you went wild, flexing mindless muscles. Sure, nobody would know the difference. I wonder if the world were only men, would only war and digging graves get done. What's that you're saying now? Whose box is this? Well, I'll be damned. Katie O'Leary, that's who. As you could tell the difference between real women and a little droopy twit. Well, I was never a droopy thing, not like that Minzy Donovan and her sly stiff of a husband. Spent half of their lives praying and sucking up to God, so they wouldn't end up like me. All the while his weasel eyes would sneak a peek when I bent over, hanging up the wash. They're over there beneath that cute pink stone, the one with the little angel heads on top. Just like her to leave the bodies out, as if the angels could have tits. I'd have them made up of wheel and set them copulating on the grass. Hey, they thought I was trash when I came across in 1880. America, where even tinkers didn't need to steal, although they missed the fun of it. Instead, I slept in shifts in a rented room, a little bigger than this box. The bathroom in the hall was shared with all the roomers. All the times I couldn't wait and peed in the potted palm in the hall. The landlady was always wondering why the leaves were turning yellow. I told her it was for cooking killed the plants. The smell of rotten cabbage worse than a barrel of farts. She made me leave after that. Anyway, she had horns and a tail, but I didn't care. Hey, stop that! What in hell do you think you're doing up there? This box may look like an old chipped outhouse, but it's disrespect to piss on it. My God, they're raising them irreverent as priests these days. Boys, I have gave birth to 5 of them myself, and I had a fine time doing it. My John went to bed stiff every night. But that was all right because he woke up stiff every morning. That's right, go on and laugh. It's just the kind of thing that you can understand. Oh, but it's just the pissing you are so gleeful about. Do they ever grow up? My John was like that too. He never had so much delight as when he farted or told some silly bathroom joke. And then he'd take a fit of laughing. Well, I didn't mind after all. He was a good man for a man. The poor things, they can't seem to make their brains and their dicks work at the same time. Well, the women these days are hardly better. When I was a girl, I worked a 10-hour shift in the mill, and when the babies came, I worked for 20 hours at home. I made the bread and mended socks, made my own soap, and washed his long johns in the tub until they fell apart. Girls nowadays spend more than I ever had on bras, the ones they buy at Victoria's Secret. Sure, it's no secret at all. They're told they aren't real women unless they're wearing the latest lift and leaf at their eyeballs bra. What kind of woman is it who doesn't already know she's a woman? But I suppose we were no better. As soon as the ads showed a woman's ankle, we were all for cutting and hemming the dress, and the movies taught us to smoke and drink and carry on like carts. That's how I got my John. Well, I've been lying here since after Election Day, November 1968. That's when Nixon was elected. You might say I took the easy way out. Well, go along with you now. You've been gawking and pissing enough into my place of rest, and you didn't get half of my story. There it is. The clods are shoveling clods on my box. I'll be safe and quiet again before they're ended their day in a drunken hole somewhere. But I'll still be here watching you all on your way to hell. That concerns Curt. And it's very appropriate because Curt had a big influence on our poetry parlor with his poem and everything. And Curt also had a big influence on a poetry reading that I run now. And Dee and Curt are so gracious, and they had invited me to lunch at their home on Lake Quinsigamond. And Curt gave me a guided tour, and he brought me upstairs and brought me to a room with a door that said the Poetarium on it. He showed me inside, and that's where Curt wrote, had all his poetry books. It was just an incredible space. But somehow my mind sort of forgot about that. And then about a year or two later, I was going to start a new reading with my friend Ron Whittle in Southbridge, and we couldn't think of a name. And all of a sudden this occurred to me, well, why don't we call it the Poetorium? And so we called it the Poetorium at Sturbridge, at Starlight. And then what happened was, I realized I stole that from Curt. So I told Curt, and he was very great. He goes, well, he didn't really steal it because it's actually the Poetarium. So I got it wrong, but and a poetarium would have been better. But anyway, Curt was the most generous person I think I've ever known. And I really miss him. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Our next speaker will be poet Susan Romney O'Brien. Please welcome Susan.
Love for Curt started a long time ago. He used to come to our house and sit under the apple tree We've worked together with Dr. Ludis, who's going to be talking later. One thing that is true about him is that he knew how people responded. He knew he could get inside a person and talk from their heart. And the two poems that I'm reading are not funny. One is called Girl of Darfur, and that's still happening now, what he wrote about. So now, he says here, Girl of Darfur. Shall I kill this baby? God, I am asking you. Each day I waver like palm in hot wind. This poor thing is innocent, but I am so full of dirty shame, of hate, that wants her away from me. And still I desire to nurse her need. My splintered will, no peace in this wounded will. One way or the other, love or kill this little one who came like knives of fire. It wasn't even lust, those many laughing at brutality. I cannot say, only again, they took my body, beat disgust into my soul. You see, God, how can I decide between innocence, hers, and mine? Did you send them? Did they not have an arm like God to reach me where I hid, to choose me, virgin girl? She cries, poor thing. Hunger is everywhere here. Her need, mine. I would as soon die. But this poor child, she is, no, not mine. Yes, mine. And daughter of too many men, whose mix of blood and sperm found their evil way in me. Oh God, she cries. Why do I want to hold her, stop her tears with my old hymns? But she looks too much like those, her eyes, her skin. I am so angry that I cannot cry. But then, sometimes, the crying is the dry wind that howls from the desert. It strangles my soul. Whirlwind God, answer me now. Curt loved children, and he could see in them what was the future. I was always astonished by his humility, his faith, and his sense of fairness. I loved when he came to my house. I loved when I got to go to his house and see the eagles. This next poem is called Shaping. Shaping. Maybe in your artist's mind, you have seen a stone with a boy inside, daring you to cut away what twisted grain
Thank you, Susan. Our next speaker is Eileen Atienza.
Well, I met Curt when he was in the sunset of his life after the pandemic, and it was like seeing rays of sunshine through clouds, and I've been discovering the man through his poetry and through your memories right now. I met him at a reading for children's poetry at the Worcester Public Library, and he brought had worked directly trying to translate into Spanish a poem that I immediately decided to edit there and then and read. Beautiful, and this is one of the two poems that I'm going to share with you. Before, however, attest to his love of children. He was sitting there, and my son was in the audience. There were a bunch of kids sitting on the floor, and you could tell he was enjoying himself. And having worked on a translation of his poems, children poetry, and still working on a translation into Spanish, I can say that he's an extraordinary poet for children. I read his poetry to my son at night, and the best way you can tell it good for children is the children who love it, right? But also as a poet and as a translator, you realize how challenging something is to translate, how deep it is, and how profound his children poetry is. So I read it first in English and then in Spanish, and then I'll finish with a different poem. Home. What if home were not a place but many? What if home were a tent that you carry? What if home were just your clothes and you? If you always moved, then who would be your friend? Could you live in a tent in New York City? Would you like to sleep beneath a bridge? Now, it is true that you are you and may not have a choice. But here's a paradox I'll give. Life could depend on where you live. In Spanish, casa. We were editing that an hour ago. We're still editing this translation. Casa. ¿Qué pasaría si tu casa no fuera un sitio sino muchos? Si fuera una tienda de campaña que cargas contigo, y si tu hogar fuera solo tu ropa y tú, si siempre te estuvieras mudando, ¿quién sería tu amigo? ¿Podrías vivir en una carpa en la ciudad de Nueva York? ¿Te gustaría dormir bajo un puente? Por otra parte, es verdad que tú eres tú, y quizá no tienes que decidir eso, pero aquí te presento una paradoja. La vida podría depender de dónde vives. In this sense of social, should I forget what you know? Shall I put the other one in that video? Yes, it's there. You can tell his incredible sense of social justice and his willingness to educate the next generation to be better people and to have solidarity. And in thinking about the next generation, this other poem, monuments. Together set apart, we are brown or red or white, Semite, Serb or Hashemite, speak Latino, Quebecois, dialect of Hindi, and all have heaven full of gods holier than thine. Leaders manipulate these in the service of greed and send the children to war. They tell us there is justice in their predatory aims and sell our wars to children in the language of our games. And after make a dead man's park and great parades to elevate the moment and prepare us for another day. Where are the monuments to all the babies slain? Shall we pile the empty cradles on the soldiers' graves? Where are the monuments to how our hatreds grew? Are they etched in stone within our homes and holy places?
Thank you, Malene. Our next speaker is the Audubon Society supporter extraordinaire and poet from Princeton. Please welcome Blair DeGulis.
As Roger just introduced me, Audubon Society, I am a field teacher with Mass Audubon and do quite a bit of work in Wachusett Meadow. One of the things that Curt and I shared was a love of the natural world. I'm going to read two poems. One, I'll speak a little bit, the second one about how that sort of came about. I will just say that Curt and I met at Monadnock, at the Pastoral Poetry Retreat. And after a few years, Susan and I conspired with Curt to meet monthly. And we met at Susan's house under the apple tree when it was lovely, and inside her library. And then we began to meet at his house on Lake Quinsigamon, where we watched the eagles. And I saw an eagle wheeling around in the sky yesterday on my bird walk. So I see that as an omen. Curt was very generous in our conversations. Besides words, as Ursula Le Guin would say, making worlds, we shared lots of other ideas. So I've heard about many of the people in this room, and now I get to meet you, about the boys' camp and the poetarium, and we got to visit his room upstairs. So it was always very lovely, and I like to think about it as treasured times. The first poem is called The Towel of Hopeful Toes, or perhaps The Dowel. Yes. I think Lao Tzu would be proud. So much science, and still I cannot say where psychic life resides. The mind, of course, but that is brain, bones, blood, every atom confused in electric connection. Well then, consciousness, awareness that works for apes and rides like foam on the sea. Memory too, that credulous receptacle for time's mangled aftertaste. And we often forget the lost self that hides the psychic relief within this pride sensory organ. What does experience know? That love cannot enter the unready organ, that stroking psychic pain like a pet toad does not induce forgiveness, that sympathy hovers like insects among funeral flowers, that wearing the love of others warms like a hand-knitted gift, and it knows hope like fairy tale codes. Once upon belief in time, we yearned to be kissed alive. And because we met so often, and I'm a bit of an amateur photographer, and take my camera out on the trail with me, Curt had given Susan and I a little basket with stones from the beach and some seagrasses. And so I gifted him back a photo of a barred owl that had landed on an oak tree near my house, and I was quietly waiting with my zoom lens. And so this photo was inspired of this poem called Pensive Owl. How wise it seems, white, upright raptor, quiet as a scholar, wrapped in act of stalking, overpowering pursuit of imagistic lore, sight and insight, bent upon a final bite, consummation, deep and meaty, summa of scholars' raptures aim. Ah, bird, thou ever worked the image of a claim to success in the academic game.
Thank you, Claire. Our next speaker probably is one of the longest-serving Poetry Association members in the audience as well. Please welcome Anne Marie Lucci.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here. I came to know Curt through the Worcester County Poetry Association, and he read, he arranged to read twice at my feature venue, the Street Beat. And the first thing that I remember him and laughed about was his father was a police officer in Boston, which must have been quite the project. But he talked about his father giving lessons on how to close a door. And I came from a big family, and I got the same lesson from my father. You turn it and close it, and then you turn it and open it. Do not slam it. And it was because he came from a family of 10 or whatever, so that was just something he said. I'm going to read two poems that Dee asked me to read. The first one is called A Reading. We came to hear you read, asking only bring us sound and sense. When you have found your voice, let us hear you twice, and let us see it on the page until it grows. Then let us hear you read again. We also grow, though ours a private and supportive role, active inner breath with you, word and breath, in breathing song, hearing whole what we need in this reach. The second poem is called Need. I have heard the poets read their hearts, expecting the pardon of art in little rooms, and already surfeited with others' expectations. I have seen the artists linger at an opening, appraise the eyes that glance and wander by, or stay to give implicit benediction. Art for art's sake, only over a glass of wine perhaps, and yes, in the lonely space until the work is done. But after that, the maker too much mourns if art sleeps easy on an unread page, or stacked in the little back room, inviting only memory's eyes. Let its still life lie. Go now to the lonely space that fills desire with writhing lines. They grow in the sweet ache that has no expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Our next speaker, welcome back, Dee O'Connor. Dee.
I just wanted to read one more poem at the end, but then I got to sign the second one. We had a change in our program, which I'll mention in a minute. But the poem I chose to read is called Places in the Heart. And the title comes from a quote by someone named Leon Boyd, who I should have looked up, but I didn't. It says, there are places in the heart which do not yet exist, and into which we enter suffering in order that they may have existence. This is in the final book that is just out now called Travelers, and I want to give a plug to Claire, whose artwork is on the cover. Claire's photograph is on the cover of the latest book. places in the heart for my love. I will not have you besieged by priests or asked to deny the love that had no creed. Let others drag love and pain into the book where only logic and dogma prevail. Sentiments dispensed like incense, unfeeling form, graceless in a spaceless dimension of loss. The human heart embraces the entrance of pain so large, no other place can let it in. Though I delight in all your happiness and joy that reaches everywhere, I would not be so mean to think your heart will not bear pain when I am gone. Love, I know that you will have me there, and that is enough eternity for me. And the final poem was going to be read and acted by a couple of others. So I just want to note that I'm going to do the reading, and my nephew, in place of Kobe, is Chase O'Connor. And thank you, Chase. And this is from his first children's book called Dances with Trees. Trees never wander. There's a reason, but we'll let that go for now. For now, it's quite enough to know that though it's true no trees can walk, it's also true that they can and can demand to dance. Of course, we'll need to redefine some terms like stride, slide, strut, caper, cavort, gavotte, entrechant. Some do plie, and so do we, so that will stay the way it is. But with no feet, the beat for trees is not so easy. Most trees dance above the waist, most with easy grace. The baobabs grow hip to crown, and banyan's arms grow roots that hold them down. There must be others that, like you and me, can't dance like other versions of a tree. We know that willows swing their hips. You see the swaying of their gowns. And burly oak dance dignified and slow. Aspen moves so cool, they gesture as they bend. But they giggle when they're tickled by the wind. When trees grow old, they dance a graceful, grave, and elegant ballet, but only when they want to. At other times, they mambo, rock, and funny hop, shrug and drive and jiggle, then go to sleep to keep the color in their cheeks, but only when they want to. I just want to add a note that we have a lot of first books, especially his newer couple. If you don't have something to donate right now, you can donate whenever. If you're not able to donate, take a book anyway. I really want this work to get to more and more people, so please take them. And I also want to mention, as follow-up to Belen's reading, that the first poem that she read that's been translated, we got some funding from the Worcester Arts Council and the Mass Arts Council to get the book put into Spanish. So we're going to have a bilingual version of the book that's called So Much Depends on Where You Live. So who chose the but also the poem that she read, which is the first one in the book, is going to be in a Spanish-only, very young children's book. It will have like one line per page with some beautiful artwork. So we're in the process of getting that all prepared. And Lynn has a wonderful friend in the Dominican Republic who referred me to her publisher, who's very excited about publishing it. And we're going to actually send a whole bunch of free books because she has a program in the Dominican, a literacy program where she donates books to children in all the villages in the Dominican Republic. So that's our next little project that's coming up. So thank you all for coming. We have a little closing music, and then there will be lots of food. So please stay and hang out and chat.
I want to thank Cody again. Where's Cody for that? Chase, is it Chase? Thank you. share. Reverse from derriere, Danny Boy. Danny Boy? Oh, okay. Well, what I will say is, knowing Curt as I did, he had that remarkable way of cutting through the fog and the smoke. And I know that right now he's giving that slight smile and a wink for this afternoon. So thank you all. Thank you to the Poetry Association, the First Unitarian Universalist Church, and our caterer, Root Truck. And thank you to all of you for celebrating. Let's go.